Hello, everyone. Welcome to our another Maison Vero Write Publish Launch session. We do these monthly to help aspiring authors write, publish, and launch their books to learn the literary landscape, what's changing. It is ever changing. To talk about the different ways you could write, publish, launch your book, and then to answer your questions at the end of our call. I'm Davin Salvagno, one of the co-founders in Maison Vero. Published a few books myself, and I am grateful to be able to own this publishing house with Scott Jeffrey Miller, the co-founder of Maison Vero, who has published 9 best-selling books himself. And Scott, give a little bit about your background, and then I'll take us through today's agenda.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm joining from Salt Lake City, Utah. Nice to see Victoria, Angela, Julie, everyone else on the call, Jessica. I've spent my whole life in the intellectual property business. I know nothing about movies or restaurants or parenting, even though I have 3 kids, but I know a lot about books. And so I've made every mistake in the book, so to speak. And so I hope to bring that knowledge to you today, both my few successes and lots of mistakes. Spent 30 years nearly with the FranklinCovey company. You may know them as the leadership development firm founded by Stephen Covey. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Spent a decade as the chief marketing officer for that firm and EVP of thought leadership. So in the course of that, published dozens of their books, and which sold, of course, 100 plus million copies. And as Davin said, I've authored 9 books myself in the nonfiction space and made every mistake possible. So the goal is to take Davin's and my collective failures and teach you what not to do
That's right.
today. You may not know what to do, but you will leave being really clear what mistakes to avoid. So we'll go through and share as much knowledge. If you have questions throughout the process, put them in the chat, raise your hand, just say, hey, can you stop? And it's a family here. We're happy to, be very organic. We don't want to hear ourselves talk. We want to make sure that at the end of this hour, you have your questions answered. And so feel free just to, raise your hand or whatever you want, and we'll hijack. We're very flexible that way.
And at any point in time, if you would like to have a direct conversation about your specific book, your specific circumstance, we are delighted to have a conversation with you at another time after this webinar. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar to answer some questions. But if you'd like some one-on-one time with either Scott or both of us, there will be a link in the chat that at any time you can click on that link and Lisa Oprita, who is our Director of Author Experience, who's also on the call, and Adam Ritchie, who is our project manager, will set up a time with us to talk to you about your book and your unique situation. So without further ado, I'm going to let Scott kick us off with kind of an update on the literary landscape, which is ever changing, but we've got some exciting news. Scott, take it away.
Yeah, so these webinars we host monthly. Sometimes there's 25 people, sometimes there's 3, right? We deliver the same message and hopefully the same value regardless. So given there's an intimate group here, you're welcome to even just come off mute and just interrupt and ask a question, right? Very informal, very casual. This is about you, not about us in the next 50 plus minutes. So let me take a few minutes and maybe dispel a couple of rumors, right? And that is, books are alive and well. I mean, the number of books that are published each year is increasing. Obviously, Amazon and Kindle has helped to make that, explode. There are multiple genres in books, right? Whether it's self-help or sci-fi or manga. In fact, right now, manga is one of the top selling genres. You know what manga is? A sort of Japanese graphic novel. If you go to a Barnes and Noble, manga is the largest section by degrees of magnitude. Not my jam, but it's huge. One of the fastest growing is romantasy, like romance and science fiction. I don't understand falling in love with a robot or whatever that means, but it's somebody's jam. But I mean, romantasy is on fire right now. Why? Escapism, right? It's a tough time to be a human, depending upon your politics or your religion or your nationality or what missile is flying your way, unfortunately. But there is a huge escape economy right now. You talk to mortgage brokers, more debt than ever before. People are 30% increase in inflation. People are escaping away from the reality of a tough life. And so it's just interesting because, quite frankly, nonfiction is down a little bit. Coming into summer, you'd expect that. But the overall, these categories shift and flow based on, all kinds of external factors. Um, Massive market for books. The young adult market is still very much alive. And, I was talking with someone a couple of days ago, and the question was asked, what's the best way to write, publish, and sell a book? At the end of the day, it's write a great book. Write a great book. You can have a huge TikTok base, you can know everybody in the world, but how books are sold is word of mouth. It's you write a great book, Davin falls in love with it, and he tells everybody he meets, and it's really old-fashioned word to word marketing. That's the most important thing you can do. We see people that have 1 million TikTok followers, and they might sell 1,000 books, and if the book is not any good, they won't talk about it. And so I just want to kind of put that as the main principle of how important it is to focus all of your time and attention and money on making sure that you are solving a problem that other people have and you're using their language, their knowledge, their challenges. You are best positioned to help your former self. Like write that down. Like that's like the best quote of the day is you're best positioned to help someone who is in your previous circumstance. And so the book market is thriving. It's growing really well. If you go to the next slide, Davin, you can see different consumption. Now, this varies by genre. So generally speaking, consumption is about 10% digital. Never really took off, if you look at a plane, you're going to have 90% people on their phone. One person's reading a print book and two are reading a digital book. So generally consumption is about 10% in ebook, about 65% in print still. Typically, most publishers release a book in hardcover first, and they do that because of the demand for the people that can afford to buy a hardcover book. People are quite fickle about book prices. My mother, who could buy Barnes and Noble, still will wait number 9 on the list to check it out at the library, right? I mean, Mom, it's $26. You can afford this. Go buy the book. No, I'll wait for my turn. And then 9 weeks later, she'll, rent the book from the library. But still about 65% consumptions in hardcover. And then typically publishers released a soft cover known as paperback after they believe the economic market is kind of saturated, and then they move to paperback for people who might be a little more price sensitive. In some cases, like for example, our publishing company, we tend to release both softcover and hardcover simultaneously. It's up to the author. And then about 25% is consumed in audio format. Now, again, all these depend on the genre. If you're Matthew McConaughey and you wrote Green Lights, it's 400% in audio because all the women want to listen to Matthew McConaughey read his book to you. I'm being kind of funny, right? Or quite frankly, if you're Jim Collins and you wrote Good to Great, I'd argue that a high percentage of that is consumed in audio because it's usually C-suite executives listening on their Peloton at 4 in the morning. And so these numbers are all dependent upon genre, but generally this is kind of how the breakdown goes. And again, like I said, it can move all over the place, but these numbers are useful as you're thinking about who is my reader, what is their circumstance, how will they consume my book, what's their unique situation, and then kind of, align accordingly. At any point, if I'm going too fast, if you have questions, feel free to stop me. Um, by the way, books are still very much being sold in retail. I'd say it's somewhere between 25 and 35% of books are still sold via bricks and mortar stores. Barnes and Noble is adding about 50 stores a year. Books A Million is expanding. In some cities, your independent bookstore is very much in some cases, a political alternative to, Amazon for those who don't want to, pay more there. So don't discount the retail bookstore, keeping in mind that most books in retail bookstores are on consignment, which means they send them back when they don't sell. And you can imagine what that book looks like when it returns back after all the shipping. And so sometimes you have to be really thoughtful of, is being in a bookstore the best thing for me? Because that book comes back and then you're dinged, the author, in many cases on the price. So being in a retail bookstore isn't always what it's cracked up to be. Here's some examples of just understanding why people write books. This is probably the most universal advice Davin and I give a reader is, why are you doing this? No judgment. We don't care. We might press on it a little bit, but your circumstance is super important. Lots of different reasons, and Javin will talk more about that in a moment here. Like, for example, Ann Chow, she's the former CEO of AT&T Business, 50 billion dollar division of AT&T. 30-year career there, was the first ever non-male person of color to ever become a CEO there. She retired. She calls it Rewired, not retired. And she wrote this book, was her second book, and it formed the basis of a very successful keynote career for her for 2 years, right? Probably gave 40 keynotes at $25,000 a year or pop, not too shabby. Luke Falk, former NFL quarterback, NFL, of course, known for being not for long. He, after being the quarterback on three different teams, repositioned himself and became a mind strength coach for junior high, high school, and college athletes, namely college athletes that are looking to cash in on their name, image, likeness, and they had budgets and money. And so he's a mind strength performance coach. This will seem self-serving, but my wife and I here live in Utah. We have three sons, 12, 14, and 16. Our 14-year-old happens to be number one in Utah in his age group for tennis and two or three in the region, top 50 in the nation. And it was going through Luke's course that really took his performance to a whole different level. So Luke uses his book almost solely for landing high school and college athletes. Jeff Birmingham, you don't know who he is. He ran for governor in Utah, high net worth private equity entrepreneur, does not need to give any keynotes, got more money than you can imagine, but he wanted to be a leading voice in the AI onslaught. Not like technically AI, but in the conversation of what is AI doing to impact humanity, institutions, churches, politics, conversation. And so he used this book to launch himself as part of that AI conversation. And it's booked him on hundreds of podcasts. And now he's helping to shape what that looks like. Everyone's goal is different. We wanted to just remind you, and Davin will talk more about this, your why, with no judgment, is the most important question you need to answer.
Yeah. This is probably the second most important slide that we're going to talk about today. As simple as it is, there'll be a more important one that's later. But the why of your book is everything. There are 4 million new titles that will be published this year. 4 million. And so the space is very, very noisy. Everyone wants to become an author. They all want to become published authors, and they all have different reasons they're doing it. Some of them are doing it because they want more impact and influence. They've got a message, they believe in their message, they want to change the world, and they have, or they want to change a single life. They've got a message, they know that they can make an impact. Some of them want to become the next influencer. That's still a thing. For some people, it's a legacy play. For some people, they're not really caring about whether or not this book turns them into someone or if this book helps them, do more speaking or build a brand, which we'll talk about in a minute. They just simply have a message that, one of their bucket list items was before I leave this earth, I want to leave a piece of me on it in book form. And so for many of them, it's just leaving a piece of their legacy in a book. For others, it is monetization. They're looking to use the book as a way to do more speaking, more coaching, more consulting. The book is a glorified business card in some cases. One of the biggest misnomers is that authors make a lot of money off of books. They don't. Economically, you might make somewhere between $1 and $4 per book that you sell by the time retailers take their cost and print costs and publisher costs. So unless you're out there selling hundreds of thousands of copies a book, you're not supporting your lifestyle off of book royalties. And, about 2% of all books sell more than 5,000 copies. And I just said there's 4 million that are being sold. So you need to have a different way to monetize your book. For many people, it's speaking, right? Getting paid 10, 15, 20, 30, $50,000 to do a keynote talk and your book gets you in that door. For others, it's coaching consulting clients and you're looking to walk alongside an individual and coach them or an organization and coach counsel them and there's a retainer and your book is your foot in the door. For companies, sometimes business development and lead generation. There's several companies that will use a book as a way to be a marketing piece for their organization that they give to clients on this is our process, this is our story, this is why you should work with us or work with our company. And the book becomes a marketing piece for the organization that creates lead generation. It could be that you're using the book to build a brand platform. I just talked about speaking. I talked about being an influencer. We had an author we were talking to yesterday who's a former fitness instructor, and she wants to do all of the above. She has been largely completely absent from social media. She shut down all of her social media a couple of years ago. She's recognizing she needs to come on the scene and she needs to fire across all three pillars. She needs to create a social brand for herself. She needs to create a speaking brand for herself. And she's going to need a book with a message that is cohesive to her speaking brand and her influencer brand to kind of tie the whole thing together. So she's kind of firing all three at the same time. Her influencer brand, her social presence, her speaking presence, and the book itself. It could be to codify a journey or a process. You have companies that a lot of times what they're trying to do is get the leadership team all on the same page. They're trying to get the employee base all on the same page. And so a lot of times a company will use a book as a way to bring their people into alignment on a journey with them. Scott often shares a great story about the Panda Express family, who, quite frankly, they built an incredible organization and they recognize that they are now leaving this amazing special thing that they built to the next generation of leadership that's going to take it over. Well, how do they make sure that the purpose, the values, the mission of the business isn't lost as it gets transitioned? The answer is publishing a book that tells that story and codifies that journey and process for the next level that's coming on. So you might have different reasons as to why you are writing your book, but you need to be very clear about what that is because it's going to determine not just how you publish and launch the book, it's also to determine how you write the book. You need to point the bat at your audience. Who is your reader? Who is your buyer? Who are you speaking to? That has to be weaved throughout how you're writing the book, which we'll talk about in a second, different ways to write the book. But you need to be clear on that why so that you could speak directly to your audience through that lens as you're writing the book. Scott, anything to add there?
Let's take a breath for a second. Given we've got a small group, it allows us to, custom any questions. Anything thus far on your mind? Something we said you disagree with, you heard something different, you have a question around the content thus far. No pressure. If you've got a question, you're welcome just to raise your hand and just voice it or throw it in the chat. We just want to make sure that we're teaching things that are relevant to each of you.
I
And
have a
so if you have a,
question.
yes, please, Jennifer.
What if it's the case that you want to write several books and the why is different for each book? I mean, of course, all of those whys are important to you, but you may attribute a different why to each book that you want to write. I mean, where do you start? How do you know where to start?
Yeah, yeah.
You can prioritize your whys, but maybe that's not the right answer in the book world.
Yeah, I'm going to take a couple of minutes on this, Davin. Can I lead out on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, check my ego for a moment, right? Like Davin mentioned, I've written 9 books, probably 5 too many, but whatever, right? I've written 9 books. Some of them were Wall Street Journal bestsellers, some of them were flops. So, my very first book, I'm just going to kind of, be organic. This was my very first book, Management Mess to Leadership Success. Wrote it 7 years ago. It did very well and it built a keynote platform and brand for me as an author. I then wrote a variety of other books that were all nonfiction, mentorship, and careers. So here's an example of 2 other books. I wrote this book called The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship. Very narrow book, right? Not every company in the world has a mentorship program, but this was a book to monetize a course that I had, like a certification program on being a certified mentor. B2B book. No one walked into Barnes& and Noble on Saturday and said, I think I'll be a mentor today. It was a very deliberate book to ship out to the Fortune 5,000 that had an established mentorship program to buy my certification program. This was a B2C book, business to consumer, career on course. This was meant to be an individual book. Quite frankly, it's a great book. It didn't do that well. I probably booked 15 keynotes on it, but it actually did not do that well because the space is extremely crowded. Another one. This is a book that my oldest son and I wrote together that Maison Vero published called Parenting. So my 14-year-old son and I wrote this book. This was a book about building his confidence. He wrote 30,000 words of this book, right? This book cost me $50,000. I've not earned a tenth of that back. But this gave my 14-year-old confidence in how to write, how to speak. We got him a speaking coach, and it just transformed his confidence, right? This was an investment in my son. This was not an investment in my business.
Mhm.
All very different whys.
Yeah.
And so I hope that's not too self-aggrandizing, but let me tell you the downside. The downside of all these different whys is my public persona. Oh, he's the mess to success guy. No, 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 he's the career guy. No, no, he's
Mm,
the parenting guy. No, no, he's the mentorship
I
guy. No,
see.
wait. And so no one really knows what I am. So there was no flywheel. Now, that's okay because I didn't want to be any one person. So I was prepared for the market confusion and I accepted that because that wasn't my goal to be the mentor guy or to be the career guy. Quite frankly, my attention span wouldn't allow that. And
Yeah.
so I was willing to deal with the downside of the sort of fractured brand with the different whys.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that it's not even just, it is really about prioritizing the whys, but knowing the reasons why or how to prioritize the whys, because you just gave me the answer. Like I am known for something, and a lot of the whys related to other books that I want to write are not related to that, what I'm known for. And I have to be known for that something first before I can branch out into these other areas. So I would automatically prioritize those books if that were the case. So I guess it would just boil down to walking through a conversation with you or Davin or whoever and understanding what choosing this why first actually translates to, or
Yes,
choosing this why first translates to, so we understand the results that we'll get from choosing a certain book first.
that's
And
right.
correct. And Jennifer, I think there is no science. It's an art. Just ask yourself all the questions. I do think there is some value in spreading them across, right? You don't want to necessarily release two books in the same year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I will tell you, there's also some upside to multiple books because I have some people who weren't in the circumstance for hiring me for a mentorship keynote, but they were watching that. And then I wrote a career book like, oh, no, no, we're having a career day. Can we buy 600 books and bring you in for three keynotes? And so you never know when one book may not be the right circumstance for a client, but you're getting their attention. And then the next book comes out and they are in that circumstance. And so there's
Yeah.
just ups and downs. As long as you kind of
Okay.
think through them, you'll navigate it well.
Thank you.
You got it.
One
Okay.
more piece in on that, and then we'll transition into how to write a book. Jennifer, there's two phrases, one that you're familiar with, one that you might not be, that I want to make sure that we take a moment right here to recognize. One is ROI, return on investment. We hear that a lot. I spoke a lot about that just now with all the different reasons that someone would write a book, what they want that book to do for them, the author.
Right.
The other is ROI, return on impact. What do you want the book to do for the reader?
Right.
Right? What is the change that you want to see them have as a result of reading your book? What is the difference that you want to see happen in their lives, their organization, their world, etc., as a result of reading your book? So you need to define both the return on investment for you for writing the book and the return on impact
Right.
for the reader. And then, as you just said, you also need to prioritize that because platform is everything. We're going to talk about this at the end of this call. You could write
Mhm.
a really great book, have a really great why, have a really good defined ROI, return on investment, return on impact. But if you don't have a platform and no one knows about it, it's not going to get out there. No one's going to buy it. The impact's not going to happen. The ROI is not going to happen. Platform is everything. So you also kind of have to ask yourself, okay, if I've got multiple books that I want to write, multiple whys, multiple ROIs, which one is going to help me build my platform the fastest because it's going to resonate? And then do I write the other books to now leverage the platform that I have built to be able to promote those books?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And you're going to pick the ROI based on your value system.
That's
So
right.
you need to know your value system and then pick the ROI that matters to you most. And hopefully that lines up with what matters to your ICP of your platform too.
That's
Can I
right.
give you one other quick instance on this and then we can move forward? You probably know Liz Wiseman. She wrote this seminal book called Multipliers, right? I actually think it's the best leadership book written in the last 15 years. Um, Liz Wiseman was the former, in essence, kind of like the chief learning officer for Oracle. Not exactly. 20-year career there, went out and wrote a book called Multipliers, and it just swept the market by storm. Liz is a probably 4 times a month, $60,000 keynote speaker and built a large business around this. And what most people don't know is her first book was a book called Rookie Smarts. It was a small little career book that did not do well. It was kind of Bush League. She regrets she wrote it. She went on to write a third book called Impact Players. She's writing a new book. These are big seminal books. But Liz will tell you in a moment of sort of, private tenderness, she wishes she had never written Rookie Smarts because it kind of got a bit of a false start on her brand. I don't think it's hurt her brand because she wrote this great book called Multipliers. But I do think your first book should be commensurate with your brand and your stature. And a lot of people trip by self-publishing some, wimpy looking book on Amazon. They think they have a book, they have a pamphlet. And so be very thoughtful about coming out of the gate strong and intentional about what you want your first book to be about and how you want it to look and present your brand to the market. Most of our calls are people that had a false start. They got all caught up into the efficiency and price of, Kindle publishing, Amazon. And then they realize, yeah, this is not the kind of brand that I wanted to build. And they're kind of retrenching. Be
Yeah,
thoughtful about that.
That's right.
totally no problem with me there. But yes, very good point. By the way, she does publish that book in her LinkedIn banner. It's right in the middle. So she's apparently trying to do something.
Oh, that's good.
She's trying to get over that part of it.
He's
Yeah.
come full circle. Awesome. All right. Well, let's transition into the first of kind of three tranches here with the 30 minutes we have left, which is how to write a book. Before we do that, actually, Scott, do you want to just really quickly, 2 minutes,
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about some of the ROI, return on impact for some
Yeah.
of the authors that I know that you've worked with? You just talked about
So,
Liz Wiseman, but just maybe a
sure.
couple other ones.
Top row, fourth from the left is a guy named Jay Schwedelson. You can see this book. Jay hosts the frequently #1 marketing podcast on iTunes. He has a large data aggregation company in Miami. He founded subjectline.com, and he's in the business of brokering data, email efficacy, opt-outs, preference centers, cam spam compliance, right? And he really wanted to refashion himself as a brand ambassador. Quite frankly, he wanted several $1 million worth of brand deals every year. He wanted to become a thought leader and he wanted to, turn into a keynoter. And so this book that we published, actually, we were the agents for this book, not the publisher per se, but this book that comes out, I think, June 9th, Stupider People Have Done It, which, by the way, he's donating all of his profits to the V Cancer Foundation, is a book that really launches his platform. If you look at some of these, if you look at right below Jay, that gentleman there, you've never heard of him. He's the most famous high net worth family photographer in the nation. So he spent 30 years flying to people's homes of high net worth and photographing their families. 30 years in their bedrooms, their closets, their dining rooms, built a huge career out of it. And so he wrote this book called Sell to the Rich. He's never taking another photograph as long as he lives. You cannot. You can't call him today and say, I'll pay you 50 grand to photograph my family. He'll say no. But he wants now to become a consultant to high luxury brands, financial services, insurance, high fashion, to tell you, here's how you market to the uber wealthy. And so this book has put him on the map for a career transition, consulting, keynoting, and courses. So everybody has a different circumstance. Again, it just reinforces there is no wrong reason. You should just be very clear on what do I want this book to do for me? And then you write it that way. More importantly, you publish it and market it in alignment with your goals. This is the last, I think, slide for me. Writing books is 10% of the process. Launching a book is 90% of the process. Let's be very clear. Regardless of who your publisher is, publishers typically do three things. They edit, they print, and they distribute. Your publisher does not market your book. Repeat, Your publisher does not market your book. This is your job, 100% your job. No matter what they tell you, they're not marketing your book. They might have a publicist that will get you on a podcast or two. By and large, you need to know this is 100% your job. Each of these books behind me, I spent between $40,000 and $70,000 marketing each one of those books. Do the math times nine. People say to me frequently, Scott, I wish my books were as successful as yours. Well, I didn't go to Europe 3 times a year. I marketed a book instead. That's where the money went. And it's paid off in terms of, how I monetized it. Same with writing a book. Everybody writes a book differently. My best advice to you here is don't feel any pressure to write it some other person's way. For example, if I turned my camera over to this wall, my house, I'm writing my 9th book right now. Like I've been writing it for 2 years. It's called The New Power Skills. This is a fake book. This is a previous book with a fake cover attached to it. It's almost done. But every one of the 28 power skills has a manila envelope, like literally an envelope taped up on the wall. And I write my chapters in email. And I keep sending it back to myself. And when it's done, I print it off. Yes, I have a printer. And I put the chapter in it so I can say, oh, that one's done. I'm a very visual learner. Some people think that is idiotic. I don't care what anyone thinks about me. It works for me. It's my style. And I'm writing my book the way I need to write it, not the way some software program that somebody else uses. I'm 58. I need to see it on the wall to motivate myself, to go up and read it, to change it. So you write your book whatever way works for you, not the way someone on Instagram is trying to sell you their writing software. First caveat. Next, there's many ways to get this done. In some cases, if you are a prolific writer, meaning your genius is converting your words in your mind through your fingers, write your book. Very few people are competent at doing that on their own. But some people are very disciplined. They get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and they write every day looking out onto the meadow mist, and they write for 90 minutes, and that's great. That ain't me. I got 3 kids, right? My morning is chaos keeping myself married to my wife because the kids are being mean to her. So, my writing style changes every day. Second, sometimes an author hires a ghostwriter. It's a very legitimate ethical process. You can pay 10 grand, you can pay $400,000 on a ghostwriter. You get what you pay for. There's downsides to this. It is hard for someone to capture your voice. No one can capture my voice, right? I'm not competent, but I have a big personality. And so they don't know my stories. They don't know the real story behind why I was fired or why I was promoted or why I got married or this would happen. They don't know that story. They can't capture my voice. And so it's risky to have someone co-write your book for you. Now, in some cases, you might hire your ghostwriter and you fly them on your Gulfstream to your third home in Maui and you spend a week doing ayahuasca. I mean, honest to God, this happens all the time. And then your ghostwriter becomes one with you. It happens. Outrageous. But there's all kinds of level of that. So somewhere between you hiring someone to fully write it, which is number 3, or sometimes it's number 2 where you hire a writing partner, which is what I do. I tend to type out all my chapters. I email it to myself 3 or 4 times over the course of 2 days. And when I think I'm done, I send it to my writing partner. And then he decides if it's done or not. Think of a football metaphor. Davin will die because it'll be wrong. But I tend to get most of my chapters to like the 3 or 4 yard line. And then my writing partner kicks it over the end zone. Sometimes he calls me and says, this is really good, but I'm struggling with this concept. What is it you're trying to say? Oh, okay. Let me take an hour and just tighten that up. Other times he says, this was masterful. No changes. Other times he calls me and says, yeah, this is ridiculous. What is it you're trying to say? Let me go take 4 hours and kind of recondition it. So everybody has a little bit of a different process. I'll tell you, number 4 is on fire. Because no matter what your opinion is of AI, it's coming. It's a tsunami. Quite frankly, right now, every publisher has a different ethical position on how do you use AI? Should you use AI? Is AI for research only? Some publishers require you to sign a document that says no AI was used in any capacity. This is a moving ball every week right now. Even we don't have a firm position on this. You can tell when a book is written by AI. I think it's going to become a ubiquitous resource that lots of authors choose to use. And as long as your reader enjoys your book, who cares? There will probably be some publishers, including us, that have human written books only because that will appeal to some people. But I will tell you, number four is very appealing because a lot of writers are better speakers. So what they do is they architect their book. They understand what kind of chapters, what's the story arc, and then they're interviewed by someone. I'm an author. Davin jumps on 12 Zoom calls with me for an hour apiece. He interviews me. I'm out walking around the dog for an hour, and I'm kind of speaking my book to him. He takes that transcript. He then transcribes it in a matter of seconds, and then he massages it into a cogent chapter in my own voice that he sends back to me. And so now I'm spending my time editing my own words versus trying to edit his words of what happened there. There's lots of other ways to write a book as well. Number two, the question was in the chat pod, how is number two different from an editor? Well, there's different kinds of editing, right? There's developmental editing, which is helping you with your architecture, your thought process, think of it like building a home, right? Your blueprint. And then there's line editing, where you've written your book and someone's actually going in and editing almost word for word. There's copy editing. This is necessary. Punctuation, grammar, syntax, references, things like that. Typically an editor, depending upon how they would describe themselves, they're usually helping you on any level. It could be conceptual. It could be kind of finishing editing. But a writing partner is someone who's kind of in the trenches with you, helping you on a week-to-week basis. Usually an editor is a little more strategic, higher level, but these words can kind of be used interchangeably. It's a good question, Victoria. Okay, that was a long download for me. Davin is definitely sick of my voice. I'll take a break from me.
Who would want to take a break from you, Scott?
Oh, sorry, I'm back. Sorry.
You're back.
Sorry.
You got one more slide. Talk about publishing, and then I'll talk
That
about
was a
process.
1 second break. Victoria,
That's
thank
right.
you for laughing. Thank you for laughing. Kind of 5 ways to publish a book. None of them are wrong. It's all about your circumstance, all about what works best for you. Traditional, these are the big houses. Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, Hay House, Hachette, HarperCollins. These are like the big 5 or 6, if you will. Increasing, they're very common. They typically are taking people with massive platforms, James Patterson, Davin Salvagno. They're taking people with massive platforms, big TikTok platforms, often paying in advance, although not always. Sometimes there's a profit share. They're very slow to market. They're already buying 2028 titles. Usually need an agent like me to shepherd you in the publishing house. Usually have superior distribution, meaning your book isn't getting into Barnes and Noble or Books A Million without one of them. And even then, it's not guaranteed. Your publisher does not guarantee you retail distribution. Walmart, Target, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, they decide. By the way, all airport distribution is pay to play. 95% of the books you see in an airport bookstore, they paid to have their book there. Because what airport bookstores sell is People Magazine, M&Ms, and water. You want the visual marketing of your book in a bookstore to repeat it, so they go and buy it on Amazon, quite frankly. Downside to traditional, takes longer. They're slower to market. If I were to sign you a book deal with a publisher, it might be somewhere between 12 and 17 months before your book actually comes out. They tend to take a little bit higher percent of the profit. You often will have a more competent editor if you need that, but not always. Independent publishing, they usually are former editors at a traditional publisher that got pissed off and left and said, I can do this faster, cheaper, and better. They open up an independent shop, may pay a small advance, may pay a higher royalty, usually faster to market, and often they're more nimble on social media, TikTok, Bookshop, all that kind of stuff. Let me skip to hybrid. Hybrid came about pretty strong in the past decade. This is also typically pay to play. These are the Greenleafs, if you will, Amplifies, Forefronts, very respectable publishers, usually aimed at either high net worth individuals or someone that can write a $50,000 check. You're paying to have your book published, like Forbes Publishing. Um, Usually a little faster to market, about a year. Faster meaning faster than traditional. To me, the downside of hybrid is the author pays for the books to be published. So in addition to you writing your check for 45, $60,000, you're also paying for the inventory. So if you're gonna, print 10,000 books at $9 a piece, you're writing a check for $90,000. Now, you're gonna get that back on the royalty if your books sell. But usually this is a publisher that has a beautiful book. They do a great job. They're probably going to sell you a lot of marketing services you may or may not need, a lot of cash out front. Lastly, self-publishing. This is where you go to Kindle and you publish a book, and then Scott sees you at a conference and says, "Oh, I love your book." And then I say to Davin, "Yeah, he doesn't have a book. He has a pamphlet." And then I move on, and you're embarrassed, and I'm embarrassed, and you regret it. Now, here's the reason why Davin and I, instead of opening up a snow cone business, which could be easier and more fun, we decided to open up a professional publishing company. And that is, we saw a huge market for people that wanted the upside of speed to market, that did not want a pamphlet. They wanted a book that they were proud of, right? They wanted a beautiful book that they were actually proud of. We've developed and printed, or published 100 books, and when your book comes off our shelf, it's gorgeous. And you don't pay for the inventory of the books because we're print on demand, which means we load up your files to our printing partner and the reader pays for the book, not you. There's no inventory. You should inventory, but we don't inventory it for you. But the benefit of professional publishing with us are a couple of things. I'm mindful of how much I'm speaking here, so I'm going to finish in 30 seconds. One is you can update your book with some frequency. Want to change the cover, want to add a new logo, want to add a new endorsement, want to find a mistake and replace it, want to add a new chapter with a nominal fee, couple $100. You could update your manuscript with some regularity. It wins an award, put it on the cover, and your speed to market is usually about 4 months from the time your manuscript is finished. And that's where I'll stop and I'll turn it back over to Davin.
By the way, that's a true story that he just shared. I'm actually the author that he actually referenced twice. Scott and I met at a conference 5 years ago. I had false started and self-published a book, and I'm one of those authors that are like, I wish I would have done that differently. And he said, Davin, you're a great writer. You should have a traditionally published book, and I would like to be your agent. And then Thieves of Purpose got a book deal and, won an award and did all the things that he just said. So I've actually been on both ends of the spectrum prior to us partnering together and launching Maison Vero as kind of like, hey, if we could do everything the way that we thought that it should have been done for our books, what would we do differently? And what we did was is we created a process, which is this next slide and the most important slide on the entire deck. And this is published on our website. If you go to masonvero.com and you click on the Our Ecosystem button, this exact slide is there. So I'm not going to go through every aspect of this because I do want to leave some time here in a few minutes for Q&A. But let me just talk high level, some key things that you're going to want to do. So as Scott mentioned, we can get a book to market within about 4 months of finished manuscript. So you can see day 60 on this map, author finishes manuscript, day 180, the book is published. A couple things that you're going to want to do that not all publishers do, regardless of who you go with, whether you go, hybrid or professional or independent or self-publish. As Scott mentioned, the biggest thing that's going to sell your book is you got to write a great book. The book has to be great. I was just on a call with an author 2 hours ago. It was very clear he used AI extensively through the book, and AI has an accent. And I shared with him, like, I could tell which parts of this book that you wrote. I could tell which parts of this book that AI wrote. It needs to go back to copy editing. It needs to actually go back to developmental editing. And so we went backwards to the process. So a couple things. One, you're going to want to make sure that you have a process to get feedback from people. So we incorporate something called 360-degree feedback, whether you use us or use someone else. Before your book goes to actual finalized editing, make sure you have people read it. Make sure you have people who read it who are candid enough to tell you, hey, here, not just, hey, Julie, I'm so excited that your book is coming out. I can't wait to support you. No, you want someone that's going to read it and say, you know, I really loved the story that you told here, and I wish you would have told more of that. Or I didn't understand why you told this story. That felt like that was a rabbit trail, and I didn't understand the point that you were making. Or you didn't have me until chapter 4. I wish chapter 4 was chapter 1. You need to write a great book. And so make sure that you have someone or people who are giving you candid feedback about your book. We build that into our process. Two more things, Scott, and I'll come to you really quick. Um, After that piece is done, you need to be very, very clear about your timeline and the launch of the book. For any publisher, it doesn't matter whether it's us, hybrid, independent, self-publishing. Once you turn that book in, it triggers a domino effect of things that need to happen. Going to copy edit, going to interior layout, going to a final production review and a final copy edit, and then going, up into uploading the book and then you getting a copy and making sure that the book is perfect and how you want it. There was no typos before it goes to pre-order and it goes to launch. A lot of times I see authors make this mistake. They didn't spend enough time in that first 60 days of this roadmap getting the book tight and getting the feedback that they needed. And now they want to make changes after the process has kicked off and now there's some tight deadlines. So make sure you don't shortcut the first part of that process for the risk of just getting your book out there. Scott, what were you going to say?
Let me dispel a quick rumor, and then we'll open it for questions, I believe. The reason most books are 65, 70,000 words is because the publisher feels they need to justify the price. A $28 book needs to be 70,000 words. It's why no one reads the second half of any book because the author typically has like 35,000 words, but they got to get to 65,000 because their contract said that, and they phone the second half in. You know it's true. The second half of every book sucks, especially business books. No one reads them. And so my encouragement to you is do not follow that trap. Write a small book. What is the attention span of all of us? We're busy, right? I mean, today I will get 300 emails. I'll get 40 Instagram messages and 30 LinkedIn messages. I'll get 100 texts. I've got 9 Zoom calls. I don't have time for this in my life anymore. I have time for this. I have time for a book that you buy in Miami and you're done by Dallas. That's your number. 35, 40,000 words, takes 2 hours, 2.5 hours to read. Does anybody here have a longer attention span than you did a year ago? No. So my encouragement is to you is write a short book. This book is The Gift of Struggle. It's about 30,000 words. It sold 40,000 copies because someone could read it from Miami to Dallas. They land in Dallas and they say, that was amazing. They call up their assistant, Tom, find me this Bobby Herrera guide. I want him keynoting next month's town hall for our company. That's how that works. So my plea for you is write as few words as is necessary. When in doubt, cut it out. Last slide. Unfortunately, I'm going to speak some more. I'm not going to go through this. I told you earlier, writing a book is 10% of the process. Launching it is 90%. Before you write a word, you need to be thinking about your launch platform, my Instagram, my TikTok, my YouTube, my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Substack, my website, my database. What is my author platform? Because quite frankly, although you need to write a great book, if people can't find you, they can't buy it. And so you've got to be thinking obsessively about building your platform. Where's my posse? Here's a great example. I swear I'll be quiet. Davin's texted me 9 times. Stop speaking. I write nonfiction books only. I couldn't write a fiction book to save my life. All my books are in the career, leadership, self-help genre. My key audience are really in business to buy my keynote, not my book. My biggest number of keynote, I give about 50 keynotes a year, about 50. This year, probably close to 60. And the vast majority come from Facebook, not LinkedIn. I have 40 something thousand connections on LinkedIn. I have a strong LinkedIn. Most of my keynotes, which is how I monetize my book, is you don't make money off books. You make money off what a book does for you. Coaching, consulting, keynoting, courses, whatever your plan is. The reason Facebook drives my keynotes is because one of the largest audiences on Facebook are 62-year-old females, and they still dominate chief human resource officer, chief people officer, chief learning officer, training and development. And that's who's buying my keynotes and buying my training. So I strongly use Facebook as the way in which I build community because that's who's buying my keynotes. The C-suite isn't as much on Facebook. And so I hope that's not like gender prejudice. Just I know my people, I know where they hang out, I know how to talk with them. And that's why most of my keynotes come from Facebook, not from LinkedIn. It's just meant to remind you, know who your reader is, know if your reader is different than your buyer, because sometimes your buyer is different than your reader. Where do they commune? What does that posse look like? And how do you go to where they are? Davin, please speak or listen, something other than my voice.
Yep. One other comment, and then we'll move to Q&A. It's different for everyone. It's different based off of your genre. There's tons of different platforms, but I think the biggest thing that this slide points out that we want to emphasize, and one of the biggest mistakes that authors make, is they wait until their book is done to start telling people about it. They wait until their book is done to launch and market it. You should start telling about it, the people about it, the minute you start writing. You should be inviting people on the journey with you. Show pictures of you sitting on the couch with your coffee cup and your laptop open and share some of what you're writing with the world. Give pieces, give clippings, give snippets. Invite them on the writing journey with you and share the core message of your book to start getting people interested in it from day one, right? As soon as you have the cover done, start marketing the cover. Start putting your brand around that. You should be marketing your book the moment that you start writing it by inviting people on the journey and starting to share snippets and pieces and assets along the writing, the publishing, and the launch plan. We could spend a whole another hour just talking about launch. We are out of time. If you want to talk about your book more, again, there's a link in the chat. We'd be happy to talk to you just to give you advice, share insights from our journey and how we might be able to support you. But with that, let's open it up for 5, 10 minutes of Q&A for anything maybe we didn't discuss that hopefully you were hoping to get answered.
I have a question.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, guys. Um, while we focus on helping, get speakers on stages and develop people, part of my developing is a Fortune 500. He's a former Fortune 500 exec, and it's a very niche topic. And I'm trying to help him show up on social media before his book comes out so that he's not just flooding people with his self-promotion. But I wondered if you guys have any counsel on just someone that is that kind of persona. He doesn't have a publisher yet, so you guys could be a great solution for him. But any counsel for him where he's in the stage of he's working on the chapters, he's interviewing different people, so he has access to a great Rolodex of thought leaders. Anyway, I probably need to schedule a call with him, but if you have any thoughts about that.
Dad and I both do is start. You kind of can't get it wrong. Is he should be every day connecting to 25 or 35 more people a day. In LinkedIn, you can have about 130 connections a week. They limit you. They cap you at 30,000, but you can send out, I don't think he should send them out, but I think someone should be sending out connection requests on LinkedIn minimally, different strategy for each platform, and then just authentically talking. What's he interested in? What's he struggling with? He could even document his writing process. I mean, I think some of the best content is just a vulnerable description of, I'm writing a book. What does that mean? I'm not entirely sure. Here's what I think I know. And you never should judge your social engagement by likes or comments or shares. It does not matter. What matters is people are watching. Everybody is a voyeur. 99% of people are just watching. And so I judge my social media progress by what someone says to me at church on Sunday, what
Yes.
someone says at a restaurant. Someone says, "Oh, I see your son graduated high school. You got a new
Yes.
dog, or you're writing a new book." You never judge your social on what the optics look like. You're just feeding your people. You're subconsciously reminding them something that you're doing and you're conditioning them. And by the way, you're adding value because everybody wants to write a book. Everybody wants to build a brand. And the more vulnerable you are, just kind of sharing your journey, you're going to build a following that's very loyal as opposed to buy my book, buy my book. No, no, no. Never say that, right? Never. You don't need to put the LinkedIn. Can I tell you what the two stupidest questions are in the world?
Okay.
Two stupidest questions in the world are when you're at the Magic Kingdom and you ask the Disney worker, what time is the 4 o'clock parade? And they always say, 4 o'clock. I worked at Disney for 4 years. The second stupidest question is, where can I buy your book? Um, Everywhere? Have you heard? I mean, I'm asked all the time, where can I buy your book? Do you want 70 places or do you think, have you heard of Amazon? And so my point, people will find your book. People will find the link, right? They'll, trust me, they'll find your book if they want it. And so your content should just be selfless, abundant teaching and learning.
Yeah, can
Davin,
I
you
add
say
one
what?
more? Yeah, let me add one more thing to that, and then we can take another question. By the way, we don't have a hard stop, so if you guys want to stay on a little bit longer, we can. But let me add one more thing to that. What's most important is that you invite people onto the mission of your book, onto the impact of your book. Not saying, buy my book, support me, help me become a number one bestseller, help me, 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 me. No, no, no. Like one of the greatest examples of this is a book we published earlier this year, Do It Afraid by Kent Chevalier. He's the chaplain for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He followed our launch plan flawlessly. We gave him a launch plan. He executed it flawlessly. The book became a number one bestseller. He sold thousands of copies during pre-order before the book was ever out because he did one thing really, really well as a part of that launch plan. He never talked about asking people to buy his book. What he kept on doing is saying, "Hey, listen, I wrote this book because there was a point in time where I had to step out in fear in order to become who I need to become." And we all know people in our lives who are trapped on the other side of fear that is preventing them from stepping into their God-given purpose. And so we need to help them cross that gap. We need to help them step out into fear to help them become who they want to become. He invited his reader on the mission. And what happened is people started thinking, oh my gosh, my mom needs this book. My dad needs this book. My daughter needs this book. My brother needs the book. They started thinking about the people in their lives who needed the book because of the core message of the book. So if you do one thing right, it's invite people onto the mission of your book, the problem that your book solves. And A, they're going to either want it for themselves or they're going to be thinking about someone that they want to give that book to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next question. Victoria.
I have a question in terms of what your team should look like on kind of the more bootstrap side of things, and then if you want to go full out, what would that look like? Who are the key players that you need to consider in helping you get the book across the finish line?
Davin, why don't you own this? One, I have a hard stop. Davin is smarter than I am, and you'd love to hear his voice versus mine. So I'm going to beg out. But Davin has
I'll
much more
stick.
confidence, and he's more likable than me, too. So it's been nice being with you all. Glad you're here. Davin, you're up.
Thanks, Scott. Victoria, when you say team, are you talking about the people who will be working with you on the book and bringing it to market, or are you talking about like ambassadors that are helping promote and launch it, or both?
Helping you bring it to market. So
Yeah.
the people who can help you as you're writing and
Yeah.
putting it together, and then once that's done, who are the folks that will help you bring it to the masses, hopefully.
Excellent. Yeah. So if you want, I mean, there's again, as we talked about earlier, there's lots of great ways to write a book. They're all going to need some of the same things. You're going to need a talented cover designer. Cover design is an art. Do not put your, do not prompt AI to create your cover. You can tell a book cover that was created by AI and one that was created by a designer, right? Cheap, fast, easy, prompt AI to create a book cover, but you could tell AI has an accent. So you're going to want a, now you could use it to generate ideas and say, I kind of want my book cover to look something like this. And we do that all the time. But you want to have a talented, experienced designer, cover design, not just designer. There's a difference between graphic design, and cover design. Cover design is an art. There are specific specs, layouts. It needs to be in a specific InDesign file to be uploaded in the right way. And so you need to have a book cover designer. That's number one. Number two, you need two types. There's really three types of editor. There's two that you need. There's one that's optional. The two that you need are going to be a line editor and a copy editor, and sometimes they're the same person. And the one that's optional is a developmental editor. Now, the developmental editor, as Scott talked about, is someone who is actually going to help you architect the book. Think about building a house, if you will. They are the architect that's going to design the house. Now, you might say, hey, I don't need someone to do that. I already know what the house I want. I know what I want it to look like. I know how I want it laid out. I know exactly how I want the rooms. I even know how big the rooms are going to be. So you might not need a developmental editor if you're a really great writer, really good storyteller, and you are really good at organizing content to turn it into a book that's just a page turner. Or you might need an architect to help you do that. That's a developmental editor. The copy editor and line editor, which you are going to need, is the copy editor is the person who's basically going to come in, or I'm sorry, the line editor is the one that's going to come in, and they're going to be the ones that are basically, drywalling and mudding and painting and like finishing the inside of the house. Like you may have built it, but they're finishing it, right? And then the copy editor is going to come in and they're going to interior decorating it. They're setting it, they're putting all the pieces on, and they're making sure that it's like ready to show, ready to sell, whatever the case is. But you're going to need that. So sometimes you can have one person that's all three of them. They do developmental editing, they do copy editing, they do line editing. Sometimes more often than not, the developmental editor doesn't do line editing and copy editing. There's a lot of cases where the line editor and the copy editor are the same person. So you're going to need those. So cover designer, editors, and then layout designer, which sometimes your cover designer may also do layout. Sometimes they're a different person. Layout, again, is a very specific art. This is actually taking your Microsoft Word document and putting it into a book and a spread and the different pieces, like making sure that the icons are where you want them to be. And if you have pull-out quotes, right? Are they in the margin? Are they here, right? At the back of the book, you have back matter that tells your reader what you want them to do next. What does that look like if they're booking you to speak, right? Is there a picture of you and is it, your social media graph, all those types of pieces, all the elements of turning the book from a Word document into a beautiful laid out book with all the intricate details. Your layout designer is going to do that. So cover designer, editors, you may have one, you may have two, and layout designer. You're absolutely going to need those. And then they should be delivering you InDesign and PDF files. So all of your design files will be InDesign, your final manuscript will PDF, and then those will get uploaded to a publisher, a printer, depending on which path Obvious use. So that's if you're bootstrapping it, that's what you need. If you are working traditional, independent, hybrid, or professional, all of those publishers have those people on staff. Only if you're self-publishing do you need to go and find those people. But if you're working with Maison Vero or a hybrid or an independent, they're doing all that for you. So you don't need them because that's basically what you're paying for in hiring the publisher as a one-stop shop for all that. Switch to launch. To launch the book, you need to create some ambassadors. You need to figure out who are the people that are really going to get behind your message and support you. And there's different ways to do this. You could build a Facebook ambassador launch group. You can build a LinkedIn ambassador launch group. You could start inviting people to those groups and you could start seeding them out books. The book is always available to the author before it's available to the public if you are publishing, not self-publishing. If you're self-publishing, it's usually available at the same time. But if you're going with a publisher, the publisher is usually able to get the author of their book months before the general public gets the book. And that's a strategic advantage because then what you can actually do, and this is what Kent did, right? Kent got hundreds of copies of his books and he mailed it to influential people in his life and built a whole Facebook ambassador launch group and went and said, hey, post a picture holding the book and tell me what most resonates with you. Why are you an ambassador, right? Who is it that you're hoping this book helps, right? And all of a sudden he created hundreds and eventually I think 1,500 total people in his launch group that were all out there basically not marketing the book, not saying support Kent, he's a friend, saying, no, this book changed my life. It changed my sister's life. It changed my brother's life. It changed my daughter's life. Go get this book, right? And so who are the strategic people that you already have in your sphere of influence, and how are you inviting them to be a part of this journey with them, getting the book in your hand, and then helping them be a part of your platform? Did that
Gotcha.
answer your
And then,
question?
so yes, and then in terms of the marketing, what happens after that? So once the book is out, who helps with the like the publicity piece of it, like maybe booking you on podcasts and
Yeah.
all of that?
Lots of options. Okay, so a couple things. So first of all, the first thing I want to say is that launching and marketing a book is a long game. The biggest mistake that I see authors make is their book launches. It doesn't hit number one the week that it launches. They start to get discouraged. They start thinking about what they were doing wrong, and after a couple months, they start giving up on the book. Marketing the book is long. In fact, I don't know if you know who Mark Batterson is, but Mark Batterson, he's written a ton of books. His newest book, Gradually Then Suddenly, is an amazing book. I was with him at a conference in San Diego last 2 weeks ago, and we were talking. And he said this, but then he also said it in his book. And he said, the first three books that I wrote that all eventually went on to sell millions of copies in their first, second, and third year sold very little, very, very little in their first, second, and third year. But what he did was he continued to share the message from those books. And then just gradually, then suddenly, which is the essence of his latest book, what happened is a lot of the word of mouth and seeds that had been planted over that first, second, and third year, all of a sudden, year four, boom, the book became a big book because he just kept on playing the long game. And so the biggest thing I can tell you first before I decide like which direction you go in is know that launching and marketing the book is a multi-year journey. Do not get discouraged if the book doesn't all of a sudden come out as a number one bestseller. I said earlier, the average book, sells 500 to 1,000 copies in its lifetime. 4 million titles this year. The average, they will sell 500 to 1,000 copies in their lifetime. 2% of all books sell more than 5,000 copies. Now, that said, if you do it right and you take a strategic approach to this, you can be in that top 2%. So there's lots of PR firms that you can hire. There's lots of companies like Voices to Connect, actually Julie and Jessica, who are on this call, that have programs and affiliate groups that you can join over a period of time to actually talk about how you do that and how you get your book out there and to build a community around you. There are different marketing agencies that will help you build your brand platform. We work with many of them, Speaker Brand, Design Savvy, there's lots of them. So there's lots of things that you could do to get the book out there. Let me tell you what not to do. Do not do this. Don't go pay $40,000 to stand in Times Square and have your picture up for 5 seconds on a big LED screen and say, "Look, Ma, I made it." Don't do that. That's not selling any books. It's great for social media. It makes you feel fantastic. Nobody is buying your book because you flew to New York and you saw yourself on Times Square for 2.3 seconds. Don't do that. Okay. There's lots of proven ways on how you get your book out there, the message of your book out there, the branding of your book, how you get on podcasts. Two other things. Number one, never say no to a podcast. It doesn't matter whether it's Joe Rogan or Mel Robbins or if it's to the vanity plate, anyone can buy it. That's exactly right, Jessica. It doesn't matter whether it's Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, or Joe Rogan or whoever, or it's the person who like just launched their podcast 2 weeks ago and they're like, "Hey, will you please be a guest on my podcast?" Never say no to a podcast because you never know who's listening to that podcast and whose sister is the CHRO of this or the event planner for this. And everyone who is a somebody was once an undiscovered nobody, right? And at some point, they were all on their first podcast that nobody's ever heard of. And then like Brené Brown, nobody knew who Brené Brown was. She was a professor at Houston, and then all of a sudden one day she's like, "You know what? I don't care anymore. I'm just going to be vulnerable and I'm just going to say what I want to say." And then all of a sudden everyone fell in love with her. But the first couple podcasts, I guarantee you, is some podunk podcast in Houston, right? So start and never say no to a podcast. Now, that said, you could also pay agents, PR firms, and companies to get you on highly followed podcast where your message will resonate. And I know that's kind of, I feel like I just gave you like a massive buffet of Victoria, you can do everything. And the reality is you can do everything, but don't do everything. Pick very specific things that you know that your message is going to resonate here. It's not going to resonate here. I have a budget for this. I don't have a budget for this. Am I actually going to get the ROI? And maybe not in book sales, but from a brand standpoint, right? Will doing this, being on this podcast strategically, or doing this yield me a keynote talk? And how much am I charging for a keynote talk? And will that ROI cover the cost of doing this? So you got to weigh that very calculatively. And there are lots of professionals that can help you with that. Scott and I can help you with that. People like to Connect can help you with that. There's lots of organizations you can work with to help you with that.
All right. Thank you. I come from the music industry. I was an artist way back in the day. And a lot of the process that you guys were talking about just really reminded me of how the music industry works. Very, very, so many parallels.
It's not too dissimilar. It really isn't. I mean, think about how many people like have recorded their song, put it on YouTube, hoping to be discovered, right? Hoping to make it big. It's not too dissimilar, right? That there is a process. It is a journey. It is a long game. A lot of the artists that we know of today, they've got amazing stories of how they waited tables in 7 years, for 7 years until their, book or their song or their whatever was discovered. So just recognize in an instant gratification society, it's a long game. And if you really believe in your message, then you just keep going and you keep planting and you keep watering. And at the right time, it'll all click.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, today was great. Thank you for joining us. We'll probably do another one of these at some point in July, probably towards the end of July. And as we shared before, if you want to talk more to either Scott or I, there is a link in the chat, and Lisa and Adam can help connect you to us. So look forward to seeing what you will write and what you will share with the world, and happy to support you however we can.